There was a time when we were one unified point of consciousness, a singularity that in fractions of a second exploded in a big bang. Since then, life has been evolving exponentially, accelerating. Roughly 2 million years ago, we started using tools and technologies to extend our abilities. As life continues to evolve exponentially, the Two Paths podcast explores the opportunities of modern day tools and technologies as part of our greater becoming. Welcome. Two Paths podcast is a production of I Am Connected, a digital platform dedicated to the evolution of consciousness. Check us out at iamconnected.com. Today's guest is Nichol Bradford. I first met Nichol through the Transformative Technologies ecosystem. Nichol was looking for someone to support their ecosystem development efforts in Australia, which for me, having worked in the startup and innovation scene for close to a decade before, with a passion for consciousness, it was a great connection. I've got to know Nichol really well over the last 4 years, and she's someone that I hold in high regard as a leader in this technology and human transformation space. Nichol invests as a co-founder and partner at Near Collective. It's a seed stage venture fund. She builds community as the co-founder of Transformative Technologies.org, which is a global ecosystem dedicated to educating, gathering, and activating well-being technology founders, investors, and innovators. With 9,000 members in 72 countries, she shapes global thinking as a speaker, futurist, strategist, and author in this space. Nichol is also a senior interactive entertainment executive. She has been responsible for strategy, operations, marketing, and production roles at major brands like Epic Games, Activision Blizzard, Disney, and Vivendi. Nichol led operations for World of Warcraft China and all of Blizzard Entertainment's properties in China, as well as held a key role on the Vivendi Games team responsible for the Activision Blizzard merger, an $18 billion deal and an industry-defining event. She's helped produce events in the metaverse at Epic that broke world records. Nichol's an adjunct professor at Stanford University, a graduate of Singularity University's Global Solutions Program, and has an MBA from Wharton School of Business. She is a university trustee at CIIS and is a fellow at the British American Project. I really revel in the opportunity to sit with Nichol and discuss all things consciousness and technology. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. Hello. Hey, Nichol.
Hi.
So welcome. I'm really appreciate you taking the time to jump on this. It's really just a chat. You know, we catch up periodically. We both share a passion for positive influence that technology can be on the evolution of humanity, the evolution of consciousness. We're connected through the Transformative Technology community, where you support a community of entrepreneurs and innovators that are building human-centered technologies to help us to evolve. And so I'm taking the opportunity to actually record one of these chats is it's exciting for me, and hopefully those watching that will get as much value out of it. Before I lead into some questions...
It's always a pleasure for me to talk to you. It's like always a pleasure to talk to you. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nichol. I just doing a little prep for this. I recently reread your mission, like to amplify human intelligence, unlock our collective, individual and collective potential, and usher in a brighter future for everyone through the power of exponential technology. And I'm like, yeah, me too. Like, that's what I want. And I feel like that's why we vibe together, and that's why we connect, because we do share a lot of similarities in what we're working towards. So let's start by talking a little about the work that you do and how you're supporting people.
Yeah, so I, as you mentioned, I think a lot about the future of humanity and human potential, and I write about it to our community. The total footprint, social and email, is about 26,000. And so I write about it, I think about it. And I also have started investing. And so I have a venture fund, a micro venture fund that I'm a founding partner in called Nerimia. And we invest in wellness and well-being tech. And so I'm thinking, I'm investing, I'm speaking, and just really sort of like leaning into the future.
In that community, that's essentially made up primarily of entrepreneurs, innovators, and just key stakeholders around this, I guess, well-being tech sector. Is that fair to say?
Well, I would say that it's made up of builders, and builders can be in a lot of places, but it's more of the psychology of people who are really creating and building things. And, we tend to talk to a lot of founders and tech founders. But, people are at their core builders. So you can be in a corporation and be a builder. You don't have to be a founder to be a builder. So I would say our community is builders who are building at this intersection of humanity and technology.
Yeah, awesome. So tell us a little bit about, for the people that don't know you, tell us a little bit about your personal journey that got you to this point. Like, why this? Because I know your background was in gaming previously, World of Warcraft, and in China. But what got you to this point where this is like the body of work that you're doing, that you're really bringing your purpose to?
Yeah, if you really knew me, you would know that I spent most of my life feeling very alone and very lonely. And so, I actually just, I'm obsessed with Mid-Journey, AI augmented art creation. And so I recently just made an image of a little black girl inside of a snow globe, sort of separated, from the world by this glass. And it's wonderful as a speaker to be able to like make your own images, like to actually like make images that are exactly what you want. And so anyway, I made this image, and it's how I felt for most of my life. Like there was just this glass between me and everyone. And, I had, for a lot of reasons, really thought that I would always be alone. And I felt deeply lonely. And you might say that, that came from being one of the only Black children in my elementary and middle school and junior high school in Texas, where I grew up. Or you might say that it came from being a geek and a nerd and in all advanced placement classes, in a neighborhood where that wasn't necessarily cool. But I would say it sort of came from, for a lot of reasons, that's for another time. I decided at a very young age, I would say probably around 6, that I would have to take care of myself and that I would be on my own. That was child's logic. Like I had parents who took care of me, but that was just the conclusion that I came to. And it was really funny. I was thinking about it today. At 17, I announced to my doting parents that that I would be taking care of myself going forward, and that they didn't need to pay for college. And in fact, they didn't. They would have tried to, I believe. And I went to a local public school, public university, so I'm sure it would have been possible. But it was just obvious to me at 17 when I graduated from high school that I should be paying for college. It's like, anyway, so, that's what I thought. I thought that I was on my own, and I thought that no one would help me and that I would just be alone. And so, I went on my career and it was interesting. It was like, no matter how popular I was or how many parties I went to or had or how many partners I had, I always thought that I always felt this like deep loneliness that was very much like it was like a low grade fever. It's like a low grade loneliness that was always running in the background. And then I went on this meditation retreat, and the last 3 days of this meditation retreat, I actually felt the web of life. Like I felt connected to everything. And it was, so different than the way I have felt, for my entire life, that I sort of lunged for it. So, I was a rising executive in games. I ran a big $250 million business in China. And I, within a year, had left it all and moved to San Francisco, which is the place where there's the largest number of people who are both interested in consciousness and tech. And, and I sort of, set out to understand and explore to find like this connection. And so I started with, of course, I looked at it, spiritually and psychologically, and did a lot of, work and exploration. But I also looked at it technically or technologically, because I believed that, everyone should have access to it. And, because of loving science fiction and technology since I was a child, I had this deep belief that that is the way we create tools that are available to all. And I think also maybe because I felt so alone, I wanted everyone to have access to all of the good things. Probably, definitely myself, but, I really saw myself as, one of just many people. So with that, I moved to the Bay and I started Transformative Tech. And, initially with two co-founders, Mikey Siegel and Jeffrey Martin. And then eventually I just started organizing a lot of the conferences and ultimately sort of did those on my own. And it was always sort of like pushing at the edge of human potential as defined by mental health, social health, and emotional health. And, initially, the world thought that I was insane. A bunch of my game friends wanted to do an intervention because I left this sort of golden path. And I, and when I first started out, it was before Calm as the meditation app. Meditation was still weird. Yoga was just taking off. And so I would talk about, scalable tools for stress, anxiety, depression, connection, purpose, belief. And most people thought I was crazy. You didn't. You showed up pretty early. But a lot of other people thought I was crazy. And it just wasn't, people started to believe in mental health and tech when it became clear that, there was a problem and it wasn't going away. And it wasn't just a few people, it was lots of people. There was just a study, Gallup just put out a study on the rise of global unhappiness. And a lot of people think that the mental health and unhappiness issues that we have right now started during the pandemic. This is not true. It's been rising for the last decade. Yeah. And so, but what did happen with the pandemic is, I went from being crazy to being, right.
Yeah.
It's not the way you want to be, right? But right. And, with the world embracing this, and it's funny, it's like the other day I was pitching LPs and, it was just really stunning. Not one of them, argued with me about the importance of mental, social, and emotional health. And I remember just 3 years ago, people being like, yeah, well, is that really a big market? They all were like, what are you investing in? Tell us about what you picked. This is needed. And so that is that's extraordinary. That the pandemic really put a fine point for many people on one, mental health, but two, the importance of connectedness remotely, because the world of work is not going back to what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it did exacerbate it, the pandemic. What I appreciate, one of the things coming into transformative tech is that the frameworks and the structures that you bring to it. And like, I know a lot of the world at the moment is still in this mental health well-being crisis, and that has become evident as you highlighted, but there's a continuation beyond that, and beyond just mental health, beyond just well-being, and the technologies that are being built within the community can support across this spectrum of well-being and becoming more than we are. And so that's really exciting to me, is like when we talk about technology as tools, like we've used tools throughout, for millions of years to extend our abilities. And right now, applying these tools, these technologies to mental health and well-being is really pertinent, and there's a growing market for it. But I feel like it also brings us early to the party when we look at, well, where can technology take us as like human intelligence, and extending our abilities and helping us to become our greater becoming. And that's like the crux of what this podcast is really, these conversations is like, well, what is it that we can become, and how does technology hinder that, and how does technology help that? And that's where I really fell into transformative tech, because like you, I felt a sense of suffering in my own way growing up, and it was meditation also for me that helped me to move beyond that suffering, and wanting that with other people, and wanting to share that with other people. But it was at a time where you talk meditation in a business setting, their eyes would either glaze over or they would roll back in their heads. And so then I started looking at the science, like trying to come at it from a logical point of view to legitimize why people should be meditating. And in that startup innovation space for a number of almost a decade. And so it was a breath of fresh air meeting you and the transformative technology community, and getting involved and seeing that there were other people out there that could see what I see. And like I mentioned, I feel we are early to the party. Like this continuum, that framework, it's a framework you introduced to me, like this continuum, like well-being spectrum, is really exciting to me. And so like in the work that you're doing, if we can talk about like, what do you see as the opportunities? Like we are like the content that you've been putting out in terms of the builders that are out there within the transformative technology, you're helping to share with them like frameworks and how we apply these emerging technologies to building human-centered technologies. If you could just talk about some of the challenges and opportunities and concerns that you see, like as we look forward into this space of, technology and the humanness.
Well, I mean, I think a part of it is sort of tied to what I'm looking at next. So, after the pandemic sort of proved hey, mental, social, and emotional health is important, and technology can support us in that, and in fact must. A lot of people have come into the space, and like I was just talking to the people at health, and they've started a well-being stage, or well-being tech and wellness stage. And so it's gotten mainstream. What was niche was mainstream. And, and when I think about, and also the other thing that's happened is that it started to get really segmented. So there's like a behavioral tech summit, and there's like specialized summits. And I think for me, what was always interesting is that I felt like um, these things were really interconnected. I don't think that they can be siloed, but I think, whenever something matures, people start to specialize. And so we're seeing that, and I think that's great. So I spent a lot of time thinking about, well, where do I place my time and effort? And I then started thinking about, well, okay, what do I think is next? What do I think is coming right next? And so what I'm, really focused on and obsessed with now is, essentially embodied and extended cognition, human thinking, and sensory perception. And I think that the next round of interventions are really going to be based around this. And so what human thinking is it's basically whenever human beings are in a space together, and if they have affinity, then their data starts to, or their biosignals start to align. So heart variability, galvanic skin conductance, respiration. And the other thing that happens is that even their gamma brain waves will start to align, will start to coalesce. And this has been observed repeatedly. Like this is a scientific fact at this point. Now, the what and the why and the how, to be understood. But the fact that it happens repeatedly. There's even things like, people who are in a theater in a row who don't even know each other will start to do it. Or it will start to happen. Let me put it like that. We had a guy at a conference a couple of years ago named Kazu Yano, and he's a Hitachi fellow. And he's run this on over 10 million, or collected over 10 million data bits of groups of people, and basically syncing. We also, our facial expression sync, you have 8 expressions you control, but you have over 122 facial expressions. And so when we're in affinity, we start to, our bio data starts to sync, and then we start to move in ways that are not really perception, the humans don't really see, but it happens. And so Kazu calls it dancing. We dance. So we were all always dancing with one another. Something recently that just happened, it's a study that came out just 4 weeks ago, is brain-to-brain entrainment. So for the first time, this kind of syncing happening at a distance online without audio or visual connection. And so the way that it happened was basically people playing a video game together where they have no communication except one is driving, one is accelerating. So one is steering, one is accelerating. And with that kind of collaboration, they started to have, at a distance, in separate rooms, couldn't see each other, couldn't hear each other, couldn't speak to each other. They started to have gamma brain waves coalesce, which is extraordinary. Like if you think about the level of digitization and the metaverse and all of these things, if we can get intentional about doing that. And human syncing matters because it's really tied to pro-social behavior. And it's also tied to the designation of in-group and out-of-group.
Yeah.
And if you think about a lot of the problems in the world today, much of it is about us saying, like, who's in, who's out.
Yeah,
so I think human syncing is really fascinating. And then, it's embodied and extended cognition. Like your brain is in your skull, but your mind is throughout your body and your environment. And then, there's a thing out there that we're kind of brains in jars. But actually so much of our cognition is tied to our sensory perception. and we can't perceive everything. I think I shared with you that book on fitness favors or evolution favors fitness, not reality. And
Case
so I
against
just think with
reality.
these three things, we can really start to expand our sense of what's going on, especially one another, and really also expand our overall intelligence.
Yeah, so just dropping on the human thinking, like that's sort of like rapport building, like back in the day in business training, like in terms of sales, in terms of building rapport, we were taught to get into rapport, you can consciously actually start mirroring somebody's behavior, and you find yourself in rapport with somebody. And so really it's exciting to see where the technology is going and the research is going in terms of validating that. And so what does that mean, like, for the future? Like, what does that look like moving forward? And I know you mentioned in terms of inclusion, but what is what do you see? Where do you see that human thinking going?
Mm. Well, I mean, one thing I think about a little bit different than because there was this whole period of like sales cycling around like you do this, I do this,
Yep.
and that sort of thing. I think more so it's human beings need to realize that you cannot hide. Like we cannot hide. We can't hide whether, there's sort of like, there are no universal emotions, but like emotion, the new science of emotion is that, our emotions are constructed every moment. So what I think the facial expression of anger is might not be what your facial expression looks like when you're angry. But, when people are in the same culture, certainly the same company or community or whatever, a lot of times it's sort of two big buckets of pleasant and unpleasant. And all of this like syncing sort of lines up in these ways. And so, the reality is that if you're feeling unpleasant, you can't hide it. So, I might be upset about, the cat threw up on my shoes and I come into the office and I don't have the ability or I haven't practiced the ability to shift, my psychological state. The reality is that all of that gets broadcast out and people make up their own stories about what that means.
Yeah.
But, we're broadcasting constantly. And just because you think that you're like anyone who thinks that they're not broadcasting their interior state, which whether or not it gets interpreted rightly or wrongly, who knows? But anyone who thinks they're not broadcasting their interior state doesn't actually understand what's happening. And so I think that the big thing about it is like knowing that we are, and then asking the question, if we know that we're broadcasting, then what skills are we, what skills does that demand that we develop in this new world where not only do we apparently broadcast in person, but potentially we broadcast digitally.
Yeah. I think we've all had that experience of meeting someone and just having a felt sense of what, like positive or negative, their vibe. And so, like, as technology starts to measure and research starts to measure and the ways in which we do sync, I'm just like wondering what the application for this might be, like what the future of that might be moving forward. Like, is it that we start like group flow? Like, is it that we realize that we're one human becoming, or is it like that we just be more efficient in our workplaces, or like what is the value around human syncing moving forward?
Well, I mean, I think it's all, I don't know how much it can be really separated. I think human thinking, embodied cognition, embodied and extended cognition, and sensory perception are all, I mean, I think the application is all in a bundle. And I think the bundle is, really, I think the bundle comes down, or where it benefits and where it should go, is really understanding, which will allow us to measure. Because sometimes measuring gives you understanding, and sometimes understanding gives you measuring. So it's just that first chunk. Then the second part is about amplifying, or maybe in some cases downscaling the signals. Maybe downscaling it for resilience and stress relief, or upscaling it for, increased sort of like awareness of, one another and our planet. And then the last part is sort of, understanding what does it mean to optimize that combination, those three things, and to optimize, and then also to personalize, because humans are really so very different. And so using that combination of things. And so one, I think that, one of the things that I find that I always get lemon face when I think about the way, like in many conversations that I hear about AI, especially advanced general intelligence, and there's sort of, whether people think that AI is not an issue, or that think it's going to kill us, or a bunch of other things, there is this sort of like, I think maybe almost even like a ignoring or a laziness around human intelligence. And I think that, or like, let's just figure out how to load chips in our brains. And certainly, 20 years from now, we're all going to have chips in our brains, many of us. But right now, today, we have an unused resource, or an unfully leveraged resources, which is this biological system that we have that has a vast amount of intelligence that we don't actually even understand.
And technology to a
and
large
we've never
extent.
really applied we've never really applied our creativity and our technology to understanding this and then amplifying this. And so I think how this will show up in the future is, I think we'll be a lot smarter. I think we'll be a lot happier. I think we'll be a lot more connected. I think we have a better chance of being prepared for actual, artificial intelligence, actual, advanced general intelligence. And then, I think that, ultimately, I think that, I think a lot about everyone. And so, and just from my own personal experience of just the way a tiny taste of the web of life changed my life, or I chose to change my life after having a tiny taste of the web of life. And so I think that, this can go a long way towards practically allowing people to perceive and understand that interconnectedness that we have. And then if they embrace it practically, then I think it increases the likelihood of them embracing it spiritually. And if they embrace it spiritually, the thing about the web of life is that it is filled with love. And with that sort of orientation, I don't think that, any of our existential problems that humanity is facing, from climate or otherwise, is actually that much of a problem. I think we can figure it out.
Yeah. And in that, like, I think that's an important component as we move into like the concept of AGI, in that it's an extension of our consciousness, and the need to actually really level up human consciousness and understanding and connecting to that web of life, so that we build technologies that are an extension of our consciousness and help us to evolve in positive ways, whether integrating with it or not. And I love something that you wrote recently, which was in terms of like extending human intelligence or focus around human intelligence, that you said that it could also be a place where unobstructed by physicality, we are able to re-access the part of our consciousness and perception that evolution demanded we limit to survive, which
Yeah.
so it's really stepping into those abilities, like to see like butterflies, to navigate like birds, to smell like dogs, to feel one another's heartbeats at a concert, to hear that the mycelium network beneath the forest floor. These are your words. Understand whale song and so much more. It's like for our human evolution, we had to evolve those out, but there's other obviously aspects of the web of life, animals and trees and so forth, that heighten those. And so how does technology play a part in helping us to re-access those and expand our human experience? And so as I read your stuff, I really see how, and that's where coming into transformative technology get really exciting. It's really like it's amplifying what we already have access to, or reconnecting with what we already have access to.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's funny, I spend a lot of time in meditation, and, I think this year alone, I no longer use a timer, but just sort of like judging. I would say by the time I finish this year, I will finish up at probably 300 hours with meditation this year. That's a lot of time, right? It's not monk time, but it's more than the average bear.
For an executive, that's a lot of time.
And so, right? Yeah. And so I've just had experiences that, I've had experiences that I cannot, that do not look like the everyday. I was really fortunate to sit with the Tibetan Bon teacher, Dan Brown, who was passed away at the beginning of this year. And I was really fortunate. I sat with him 3 times, which is like, I feel so fortunate. And Dan, at one point, in the Tibetan style, it's a big part of it is objectless object. And with that, you are building towards vast ocean-like awareness. And it's funny, one of the rungs on the ladder to vast ocean-like awareness is unhooking your mind from time. And it's very practical the way he approaches it. I mean, he really sort of takes you through it step by step by step. And when we got to that rung on the ladder, which I think is extraordinary too, because it's not the end state. It is not the big show. It is, it is just one of the things that gets you to the social-like awareness. And so when we got there and I did what he told me to do, which he just laid it out step by step. It wasn't a mystery. It wasn't a miracle. The floor moved up the side of the wall like Inception. Like that was my experience. And it's an eyes open meditation. So I'm not closing my eyes and imagining things. I'm not, substance free. Like none of these retreats you go on, is that allowed or tolerated. So like no substances, no eyes closed. So it's not like a dream state. And the floor moved up the side of the wall because if you unhook your mind from time, then you unhook your mind from space. And
Right.
that
Wow.
was my perception. That's how I perceived through my eyes it took about 3 or 4 hours for it to wear off. And so, I think when you read sort of a lot of the writings of the ancients around the world, and when they talk about cities and a bunch of other things, I think they're just describing how butterflies see and dogs smell and bats locate. I think they're just describing the reality that human beings had to dump in order to survive.
And so the opportunity is to use technology to, well, it's not just technology. Like I'm a meditator as well, and I'm probably close to 300 hours as well, and typically an hour a day. And for me, it's just so nourishing to step out of the conditioned reality, not to the extent where I was seeing walls go, the floor go up walls, or like go vertical like you, but to really step out of that internal dialogue and really sit in the stillness. And so that that's powerful, in its own right. And then so I guess looking at the two paths, like how do we go deep? Is it about going deeper into that and pushing against technology, or is it an integration? How does technology help to accentuate that? Like, obviously you're in the technology space.
I think it's a collaboration. I think a couple of things. I think what's actually exciting is technology is driving us to fulfill our potential. So on one hand, you must do some pretty basic things in order to survive the tech. And that includes you must learn cognitive load management. Like you must.
What's
and
that
the other
mean?
thing
What's
you must learn.
What's that mean?
It's basically, it's like, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much because it's not the point I want to make, but, cognitive load is a thing. It's how much you can focus on at a time. And it can be managed, and learning how to manage it allows you to direct it and gives you more space. And so in this world of a lot of distraction, one must learn how to do that. That's a basic skill. It's like swimming. Ooh, that's a good analogy. Oh, I'm going to use that in a talk. It's like swimming, just like every parent wants their children to learn how to swim in case you fall into a pool or anything like that. We have to learn to swim in the river of tech. And so cognitive load management is one. The second big skill is what I call, it's sort of the second big skill in the age of networks, which is where we are, is to separate identity from status. Like that is like, if you can't separate identity from status in this modern world, you will suffer. And that's because, not only are we in one network, we're actually in dozens. And the human mind, or the there's a human orientation towards status checking. And it's natural. Like it didn't just happen with Facebook. Like we're status checking from the Serengeti, because your status is what gave you access to mates, food, and allies to secure mates and food. So it's very basic. We're wired to check status.
Yeah. The lack of status could see you at exercise.
So now we're in this
tribe.
Yeah, the lack of status meant death. And so, we're in a world now where you're not just in one network, which was your village, but you can get on LinkedIn and see how you rate up professionally. You can go on Zillow and find out how much your neighbor paid for their house. You can, every time you get into an Uber or a Lyft, even though you think you don't care, you get presented with your status in terms of like what type of star rider you are. Yelp, the status of if you have a business, people are grading you all the time. And so we're just constantly, like, everyone is visible, which is the beauty of the networks. People get opportunities that they never got before. Like dating has fundamentally changed the fabric of the digital dating has changed the fabric of the US because people from different socioeconomic groups who never would have met are meeting and getting married. And people from different parts of the country who never would have met are meeting and getting married. So there's a lot of really interesting studies of the effect of dating apps, on social structure. And so it's wonderful, but it also means when everyone's visible, everyone's rateable. And that rateability leans right up against our status checking orientation for survival. And so the modern skill set is that you cannot not suffer in this modern world if you don't learn how to separate identity from status. And in order to do that, you have to do the work. You have to discover who you are. You have to become a real person. You have to do the work that it takes to break that tie so that you can have status without being your status. And you can decide what status matters to you most, and that it's a choice. So those two modern skills are essential for the tech world. So I think in one hand, the technology is really driving us. It's, in a way, if you stand back, something that's forcing people to do the inner work, to separate identity from status, and is forcing people to develop the kind of inner sensitivity that allows them to manage their cognitive load, which has a ton of other downstream effects of being able to feel a sensation that then is becoming an emotion. So it's sort of all of this is driving people towards greater potential. And then on the other side, it's well, okay, this is the world we live in. Nothing's going back. We're not going back to, we're not all going to be Amish. That's not happening. And so with that, then it's well, how do we use it? What's next? Because what's happening is the software line continues to rise and tasks continue to be done by software, and what's left are the human tasks. So, that's people solving problems together and creating things together and building things together. And so we have to get better and better at that. And that's really exciting. Yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was telling him about Midjourney, which is this AI augmented image maker. And what's amazing about it is that it's it has a shared room where I can make something and it's visible to 2 million people, and they can take what I made and build on it. And so my friend and I were in there, or I showed it to him. So I opened my Zoom and showed it to him, and I said, let's make an image, and we just started talking, and I started building out the words and the prompts, and we made an image together, and it was wonderful. It was so connected to do it. And we were augmented by AI. We were able to be creative together. And I was like, how about this word? He was like, no, try this word. And we saw what we created, and then we adjusted it, and it was beautiful. And so that's really just the beginning. And so I think we can really use the tech. We have to develop some basic skills to live with it, but we can use it. And that's what's exciting. So I think it's a terribly exciting time. I think we're being forced to change. I don't think that the outcome is written yet, which is why people like you and people like me have to keep doing what we're doing. But I think it's exciting.
Yeah, particularly as we move into the digital realm, into the metaverse, into virtual worlds, and even potentially moving beyond our biology. What comes up for you with the thought of that, in a transhuman, post-human world?
I'm not incredibly interested. It's funny. It's I am, compared to most people, I'm really out there future-wise. But compared to some of the people who are thinking a lot about uploading brains and stuff like that, I'm a little bit more practical in the sense that we've got these bodies, we have these bodies, and we have these problems. So let's attend to what is present. Yeah. And right now we can start, it's sort of when I think of embodied and extended cognition, the neuroscience on it is quite deep, but the application of it is still quite narrow. And, from my observation of human creativity and ingenuity, whenever we decide to solve things, or when we get charmed by something and start working on it, we create so quickly. And so I think we have these bodies right now and these problems right now, and lots of technology right now that we haven't pointed at ourselves to this end. And so I think the low-hanging fruit is here, and that's what I'm focused on.
Yeah. I'm keen though to just get your thoughts on, because we talk about the web of life, and like that web of life potentially has been evolving for 13.8 billion years, or at least 4.5 billion years since on planet Earth. 4 or 5 million years ago, our predecessors stood up. And so Homo sapiens, 300,000 years, modern civilization, 12,500 years. And it seems like to me, like when we talk about exponential technology, like life itself is on this exponential curve and we're a long way up that curve, and it's accelerating. And potentially, like as we talk about, like the realizing our greater potential, if we consider ourselves like not human, but that consciousness of life itself, then maybe like being over-identified with the human is a limitation for what we can truly become in a potentially post-human upload brain world. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, I don't really think that much about it. I mean, sure, I think that we're way more than I think we're way more than, we're way beyond this physical, realm. But I also think that, advanced general intelligence is coming. And I think if you talk about sort of like what's beyond this realm, then, I think what we're really good at is pulling things in from the field, but we do it inconsistently. We don't know how to do it. We don't know who we are. And I think we better figure out who we are and how to, consistently access the field before advanced general intelligence really shows up, because we're going to have to work out a partnership. And I think that our bodies, our actual bodies, are a part of that. Our connection to, the physical world is a part of our ability to pull things in. And so I think if we give that up, then, we're not going to have a great card to trade in 25 years. Now, that being said, when you're gone from this layer, or when you're gone from this life and you're gone from this life, I have no idea what happens next. I do believe that, from my experiences with the web and feeling it, I feel like we've always been together. So I don't, where I used to feel, where at times I can still feel lonely, I know I now never feel alone because I feel that interconnection at all times. Now where I used to have a low grade loneliness, now I have a low grade connectedness. And so I'm not worried and I'm not attached, but I enjoy the puzzle. And I think that's where we're at right now. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about, do we need to shed the skin or not, to become our fullest selves? I think we already are our fullest selves, and we just have to discover that.
Yeah, I feel like that in this form, finding that wholeness is a really important step no matter where technology is taking us, because if we don't have that connection to self or connection to that sense of wholeness within, well, then we'll just push our problems into our technology space, and they'll be accentuated in there because everything will move faster and quicker. And so,
well, perhaps that's the game.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe that's the game.
Is to do the work here in this human form and then use the technology to be an extension of what that might be? Is that
No,
what
I
you mean?
think it's sort of like, no, I mean, what I mean by that is just um, to understand the puzzle,
Yeah,
and to find the balance. And maybe that is just it, and it's the joy of being, in this life. It's the joyousness of that. Um, I really don't feel any, I feel a strong sense of purpose, but, I don't feel a strong sense of attachment.
yeah.
I do
It's
what I
not the
do
struggle.
because it's the puzzle that I'm here to solve with the life force that I have, in the time that I have in this form.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I feel like we all have a seed of potential within. We're all a unique part of a greater whole. I draw comfort
Mm.
from the original singularity. As far as I understand, science is still validating a big bang where everything was in a single point which exploded. So we were all connected. We were all interconnected. And I feel like the separation that a lot of us feel is we were all one unified point of consciousness, one unified point of something that exploded in fractions of a second into separation, which has been evolving since that point. And it's our ability to be able to reconnect to that underlying flow of everything creates that wholeness. And so those that feel disconnected from that are creating, ultimately creating, trying to find a way back to that wholeness when that wholeness is already here. What's exciting for me as I think about the next 20 years is imagining a world where we do feel connected, like you were saying, that underlying sense of okayness, of well-being. And then from there, what will we create if we're not using or building technologies to feel, to find ourselves and to heal ourselves, not heal ourselves, but to like to consume stuff in the hope that that is the thing that's going to fill us, when really that wholeness, that energy is all around us. It's in us. It is us. And it's the realization of that, which is a beautiful feeling. And that's, for me, meditation helps with that connection to that. And then from there, it's like, what will we build then?
Yeah, I think I think one important thing is that we aren't really that separate from our creations.
Yeah.
What if there is not actually a duality? It's not like we're using technology, this external wedge to find ourselves. We made it.
Yeah.
It's a part of us. The question is, like, how do we use all of our creations, whether it's our relationships, whether it's, the stories that we tell ourselves, whether it's the technologies that we build. How do we use all of our creations to get closer to wholeness?
Yeah. And then explore deeper into what is the potential then. It's like in an infinite world, like then what? And then what? And then what? What's what does a utopian future look like for you? Like over the next 20 years at
How do you
least? Like,
define utopian?
I guess like there's dystopian might be the thought of like the Matrix type future as we move into a digital realm, or the Ready Player One, or like less than desirable futures, the Terminator scenario. Like what can technology be, I guess, for us as we create technology as an extension of ourselves and tools to help us
Um,
to realize our
well,
potential?
I think that I'm incredibly excited by um, I'm incredibly excited by the metaverse and crypto. And the
Yeah.
reason why is not really because I'm into the metaverse or crypto, but because I think that there are three layers to the world. There's the physical layer, there's the transformative or the visible world. Let me put it that way. There's the physical layer, there's the transformative augmented layer where data goes up and down. And then there's the fully digital layers where the digital twins are, whether it's 23andMe or a digital twin of a city. And then that's where also the games are, the AI is, crypto, and whatever. And, my view is I think that the best outcome for this evolutionary window for us, or period, is for those layers to be integrated. I think there's a lot of technology that does not insist that people spend time with other people or go outside or a bunch of other things, but I think we can. So I
Yeah.
think it's an integrated ecosystem, and in order for it to be a full ecosystem, it means that the digital layers must be populated. And so if crypto greed and escapism is what gets people into the digital layer, so that the digital layer, the augmented layer, and the physical layer are fully populated, then I think it's zooming out. I think it's okay, because what I think will happen are things like brain-to-brain entrainment at a distance, us understanding that, using
Mm.
technology to fully understand embodied and extended cognition, which happens on the physical layer. And this entire ecosystem is, together what helps evolve us to a place where, let me put it like this, like it's insufficient for 10 people to feel the web of life out of 8.5
Yeah.
billion. It's
Yeah.
insufficient,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people who are like, oh, well, there's like 30 of these particular type of people will shift the world. Okay, yeah. I'm not the person who's working on that. I think there's a lot of like religious communities that are working on that in their own thing. I have no desire to, take on the banner of a religious community, though I respect
Mm.
and appreciate them. That's not my calling. I am very interested. I think about the problem of like, how do we move 8.5 billion, and meet them where they're at?
Mm.
That's what I'm interested in. And that's the little black girl from Houston, Texas, that's interested in that. And so, I really see it as like, on a football team, you don't have, 25 wide receivers. Like everybody's got a different position that they
Yeah.
play. And so, understanding this integration between technology and humanity is the position I play. And
Yeah.
I have I have so much respect and appreciation for like Tristan Harris and his work, and, the spiritual leaders that I spent a lot of time with and their work. But that's not my work. My work is to find out, how do we actually use our creations to point us towards wholeness, so
Mm.
that as many people out of the 8.5 billion as possible can, practically, and then potentially spiritually, but I'm focused on the practically part, get a taste of the web of life in however they need to taste it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate that um, using technology to help bring people into wholeness. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this chat, is like that well-being spectrum, and it's moving beyond mental health, well-being, human performance, human potential, and like wholeness. Like, and then when we're feeling whole, then it's like, then what technologies will we build, and how will we explore ourselves, and what will we know? For me, that's really exciting. And that's I guess, the utopian future that I am working towards, is helping people to wake up and reconnect to that underlying sense of that underlying web of life. And then it's like, oh, wow, I'm whole now. I don't need this stuff to try to make me whole. what would I build?
Yeah.
How do I want to express myself in this
Well,
experience?
yeah, I mean, maybe some of the things that we will do is we will, I mean, I think, first step is climate. Like
Yeah.
that's first step is climate. Second step is, you know, second step is it's not necessarily, like income inequality presupposes that currency maintains a thing, remains a thing.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, it's really, really present. It's really important. I'm not saying it's not, because that's a framework that we're in. But a lot of the thinking around income inequality presupposes that fiat remains what it is today. And so on the other side of that, it's like, do we have enough access for food, water, healthcare? Today, income inequality puts a price on those things and says, these people don't have enough income to get these things. But if we can get these things anyway, in other ways, then it isn't, it's actually what's up underneath income inequality, as opposed to, I have $5 and you have 10.
Yeah.
And so, I think, really like getting to like cleaning up the environment, really unlocking the brain and the body, and feeling like, that belongs to all humanity. So we can have, not universal sick care, but actually health, and like figuring out like, how do you actually do that, in a wider scale? How do we, have it so everyone has access to clean, good food and clean water? That's the underlying part. So I think, when we change and we, stop, dragging along a lot of these, old things that we used to think and feel, I think that we'll get a lot better at solving these things.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, and look, and it's perfect timing. That's like a big, like, mic drop.
Yep. You're awesome, Nichol. I appreciate the work that you do, and I'm always inspired by you and the connections that you make and the information that you bring into a thought leadership. And so I love following your work, and obviously I'll post in the show notes here, and as I share this conversation, how to contact with you through the Transformative Technology Network. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap? Nope.
Other than I appreciate you.
Oh, thanks. I feel a kindred spirit in you, and I'm excited to continue to share. Like, for me, what I'm doing is a 20-year journey. I want to do this for the next 20 years, because like you, like, this is my flower. This is my becoming. This is like why I'm here. And like I said, I feel like we're early to the party still, and where this is going in terms of the ways that we'll be able to apply technology. I feel like to some extent we can't even know what that could look like, because as we go into a metaverse, it's like worlds within worlds within worlds within, but not losing sight of this current reality either. Anyway, you got to go. Much love. I appreciate you. We'll talk
so
again.
Much love.
Yeah. Thanks, Nichol.
Thank you for interviewing me, or actually just the discussion. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Nichol.
Bye.
Two Paths Podcast is a production of I Am Connected, a digital platform dedicated to the evolution of consciousness. Check us out at iamconnected.com.